Hey, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of Ask Professor Paranormal. That's me. If anybody doesn't know who I am, my name is Lloyd Auerbach. I am a parapsychologist and been working in the field for, hard to believe, almost 50 years. That's kind of crazy, but uh, good to see some folks who I recognize here. Feel free to say hi and where you're from if you have not done so before. I think I kind of know where most folks are from, but you might want to let others know as well. So the purpose of the show, as the regulars know, is for you to ask questions, to just raise topics for me to address about parapsychology, about psychic phenomena, the paranormal, all that fun stuff. And you can even ask questions about pop culture. We can talk about that, as well as chocolate, since I'm also I've been trained as a professional chocolatier and run guided chocolate tastings. Also, I am, not that this comes up very often, but I am a mentalist. Got my interest in magic codified or solidified after graduate school, or because of graduate school, and I've been performing for quite some time as well, from time to time. I don't really do very much these days, but hoping to get back into it again and performing a lot. So, good to see folks here. And I'll just start out by just telling you a little bit about something that's a project that I'm involved in that is coming up. It will be open access, meaning it'll be free to see this when it comes out. And I just want to pop the link in here. There is a new journal. It's a peer-reviewed journal, which will have some elements that are for general public as well. Some will be more scientific articles, but this is a journal of parapsychology, transpersonal psychology, clinical parapsychology, and a couple other topics. It's called Parawise. It's being produced by the folks who run paranormaldailynews.com. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to put that link here as well. Great website. I'm involved in that one as well. In fact, I have an interview with a kind of an unknown psychic, you might say, who's in New York City, coming up very soon on Paranormal Daily News. I have a paper with three of my colleagues, Dr. Jerry Salfin, Dr. Beth Hedva, and Brian Williams, about a case we did virtually during the pandemic and then followed up with afterwards, kind of a very active poltergeist case. That'll be in the journal in Parawise. As I mentioned, it's going to be what's called an open access journal, which means that you'll be able to get it for free. Take a look at the articles for free. If you wanted a print copy, they'll be selling print copies as well. That will cost something. But the articles themselves, the journal itself, will be free for the public in general. Just like, and I also should mention that the Rhine Research Centers does publish the Journal of Parapsychology, and that journal has become open access as well. The only cost associated with it is if you wanted to get the print copy. But if you just want to pull articles, including the original article that my team, the folks I just mentioned, and I wrote about this virtual poltergeist case, that's in the Journal of Parapsychology as well. And you can just simply go to this website, rhine.org, and kind of work through to get to the actual Journal of Parapsychology, or just Google Journal of Parapsychology, and you will be able to find the articles. And there's a number of years worth of stuff that's there. So there are other open access journals out there these days, and this is something that has been going on as kind of just something new. As a goal for a lot of journals is to be open access as much as possible. The old model of publishing journals has been under attack for quite some time because it's been so expensive for universities and institutions to subscribe to, and forget about individuals for the most part. Our journals in parapsychology, and there are a couple of others like the Society for Psychical Research, and then there's also the Journal of Scientific Exploration, and a couple of others. So our journals are generally, many of them are open access, and others, the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research, you do need to be a member for that one, but that's a very reasonable cost, and they have a lot of information that's available for their membership as well. Okay, let's see here. Is this a US-based collective or European views as well? Well, we're hoping to get European views as well. This will be the very first issue coming out. And the same with Paranormal Daily News. It's, we're all, any journal is limited to what is submitted to the journal. It is peer reviewed, so the journal may reject some papers or certainly let people know, the authors know that they may need to revise them. But I know Jock Brokus, who runs the journal and runs Paranormal Daily News, would love to get stuff from European contributors as well. And the same goes for Paranormal Daily News. Also, I should mention that there is a community you can sign up for free on Paranormal Daily News and interact with people. And there's a couple of folks who are posting stuff almost every day, some really interesting stuff. So the idea is to make this much more interactive as we go forward, and both Paranormal Daily News and also the journal. And then there's some other plans as well. And one of the interesting things about the journal and I think Jock Brokus is doing the right thing right up front. Scientific journals sometimes are very dry. Yes, even in parapsychology. Um, and what he's decided to do, and I think it's a great idea, and in fact, we recorded our discussion, he's planning on bringing on the authors of journal papers to discuss their papers or their theories or their perspectives or their cases on Zoom, basically on a show called Deadly Departed that Jock runs. And it'll also be that'll be audio, and I think the video will be available to folks if you sign up for the free community in Paranormal Daily News as well. But the idea is, sometimes it's much better to hear from people who write these very sometimes academic articles as to what the article contains. I don't want to say dumb it down. Let's just say make it interesting for the rest of us. I will honestly say there are some authors in my field who are great thinkers, great researchers. They write too dryly for me to make my way through the whole article sometimes. So that's just, I like people who can talk about the situation, and Jock does too. And I think we're kind of headed in that direction. So the other thing that Jock is trying to promote, and one of the parts of the journal will be what I mentioned earlier, which is clinical parapsychology. And that's the idea that, we do know that people have, when they have psychic or paranormal experiences, sometimes those can be traumatic. And sadly, most of the field of psychology would consider people who talk about the trauma caused by apparitions, by ghosts, by psychic experiences of any kind as a psychological illness, or they would not give credit or any power to the actual experiences being real. And so clinical parapsychology is something many of us have been talking about. It's really trying to bring people in who can help people who have issues as a result of their psychic experiences, without stigmatizing them, without saying there's something wrong with you. Because most of the time, there can be something wrong with them, but often not because of the psychic experiences. And that's not the case in people that we deal with within the field of parapsychology or these cases. So there'll be more and more of that coming out, and just check out the journal. Just sign up for being alerted about it. Sign up for Paranormal Daily News, and just kind of keep your eyes on things for that. Also should mention Craig Weiler he's one of the main editors for Paranormal Daily News. And let me stop for a second and let you know that if there's any buffering that's going on, I've been told it's the ISP that is being used to kind of stream this. Not my ISP, but we're going through my producer who's in Pennsylvania. So just please be patient. We won't miss anything. So I wanted to mention Craig Weiler, who's a great investigative, not a reporter so much, but writer in our field. And Craig takes a real deep dive into great topics. There's a great article that he wrote on the Telepathy Tapes podcast. He wrote a book called Psy Wars, which is his deep dive into Wikipedia and their incredible bias and, honestly, prejudice against the field of parapsychology and many other topics, including alternative health for that matter. So Wikipedia has a group of people called the Guerrilla Skeptics who edit things to their satisfaction based on disbelief in any of the phenomena being or experiences being real. In fact, I just heard from a couple of the Forever Family Foundation mediums that the person who runs the Guerrilla Skeptics, Susan Gerbic, has shown up in a couple of times as under assumed names, which is fine for people going to see a medium or a psychic, and people do that all the time. But she's had readings done by two of our better mediums, and immediately then turned around and started criticizing them as being without any true justification, because it's justified if you don't believe that any of this is real. I guess it's justified in that way, but that's the bias that comes up. So kind of taking apart the readings from that perspective, that it can't be real, so here's what it must be. So anyway, this is something skeptics have been doing, for a long time. Randy did it, others did it as well. All right, so sorry, I've got my cat just dragging my leg right now. Anyone have anything that they want me to talk about, since I started with this initial bit about paranormal daily news and Parawise? Anybody have anything they want to just toss in there? Because otherwise I will talk about a couple other topics. And excuse me one second. Here. So this is Jake. Jake is right now looking very nonplussed, being picked up. All right, he's going to sit on my lap for now. All right, so we don't have, let's see. Yeah, I'll let Jake know you said hi. All right, so Tina, you saw my cat. This is one of our two. The other one is in the hallway somewhere. All right, I've been teaching 3 classes. We're just about to finish the 3 classes actually this week. One of which has been a field investigations class. This is for the Rhine Research Center, for the Rhine Education Center, of course. And let's see, and I will address that question about the next classes, at least the ones that I know that I'm teaching, in a moment. So I've been teaching field investigations. I've been teaching that's an 8-week class. I've been teaching dreams and altered states of consciousness, talking about psychic dreams and things like that. And also teaching a course looking at the equipment and technology, just the general themes of the tech that ghost hunters like to use, and the stuff that we've used also in our investigations within the field. I'll come back to that one in a moment, because I do have a couple of things I wanted to say about that. I will be teaching 2 classes for sure. There's a 3rd class that I might be teaching. I will be teaching one course, which is Human Consciousness and Survival, which is looking at the evidence for life after death, essentially. So it includes apparitions and near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, reincarnation, just a range of those things as well. And then that's an 8-week class. I'll be teaching also an 8-week class looking cross-culturally at people's psychic beliefs and how psychic abilities and psychic experience shows up in different cultures. The title of that course is Paranthropology, which is parapsychology and anthropology. And my undergraduate background was in anthropology, and I've kind of kept up a bit on that. So that's the 2nd course that I'll be teaching. I'm not quite sure. I believe there will be an introduction to parapsychology taught by Jimmy Aiken. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I believe that will be the case. And then I may be teaching a course, another 4-week class, which will be a little more just, more of an elective, not really a deep topic. It might be about how to choose and work with the psychic. It might be a psychic development course. One of those 2 will probably be the other 4-week class I'll talk about. So those will be starting beginning of May, and we should have them up on the Rhine Education Center website for registration and description by April 1st. At least that's the general goal for this. So a week after next, we should have them up as well. I know John Kruth is just working on the scheduling at this point. Not something specifically about psychic kids. That comes up certainly with the reincarnation cases. That comes up in a couple of other instances as well. I don't know that anyone who's been teaching classes, we have a class specifically on psychic children that's there. My other cat's name is not Elroy. My other cat's name is actually um, Elwood, as in the Blues Brothers, Jake and Elwood. So they're both tuxedo cats, and that just seemed to be an appropriate name for them when we got them as kittens as well. And Paul, thanks very much for mentioning that as well about the survival class. It's a good class. I really enjoy teaching that. It is kind of one of my main areas besides the investigative stuff. The paranormal tech class that I was teaching, raises a lot of issues. And, one of the things that comes up actually in discussion, and as I'm talking about that topic, and even also in the field investigation class. And before I continue, let me just say, please feel free to drop some questions in. I'll stop myself and address the questions as we go along. But one of the things I want to say is that the technology, even though it's gotten expansive, there's a wide range of things that ghost hunters like to use. There's actually was an article in Wirecutter, which is a newsletter of the New York Times a couple of years ago, where Grant Clouser actually took many of the devices and did a test on them and an ostensibly haunted place, really going through it. But the thing is that none of the technology can detect a ghost, for sure. First of all, nobody's been able to design something other than speculating that maybe this will work. And even then, you can't prove that it's detecting a ghost. No one's been able to design something to detect a ghost or psychic energy because we don't know what those things are. In other words, we don't know what a ghost is made out of because we don't know what consciousness, thing that survives, or spirit, whatever you want to call it, is made out of. You can't design a detector to detect something when you don't know what you're trying to detect. That's like saying, I'm looking for a radio station. Um, I know it's a radio station. I don't know what band it's on. It could be AM, it could be FM, it could be shortwave. I have no idea. There could be even something else that this radio is coming through. I just know that somebody told me that they heard a radio station, but I can't unless I'm using at least with radio, we know what the radio signals are, and we can try to figure out where it is on the spectrum of the electromagnetic field. We have no really good evidence that ghosts are made of something that we can detect at this point. One of the suggestions even is that consciousness is more on the quantum level, in which case we really don't have anything to detect that. So we rely at least on people, the witnesses and psychics and mediums, to help us tell us that there is a ghost present for this sort of thing. Paul's mentioning reruns of Ghost Hunters. Hopefully, if you think it's good entertainment, that's great. Personally, I got bored with it early on and annoyed with it. I got annoyed with a lot of the show, all the shows, because they make so much of an effort to focus on the equipment as their evidence. And most of the shows make very little effort to talk to the actual people, the witnesses who have had the experiences. There's, if you are doing a show and you're just focusing on the trying to see if the ghost hunters have an experience, that's fine, but you need to talk to all the witnesses, the people who have had the experiences, to find what the patterns are. And very, 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 very rarely is the pattern that the phenomena happens at night in the dark. That is a tiny percentage of all the ghostly experiences people have had, all the haunting experiences people have had. Sometimes they happen at night, but the lights are on. So that's all for TV, by the way. On the aspect of survival, um, particularly alleged evidence obtained through mediums. Some of this certainly is suggestive of psi, clairvoyance, but is it strong evidence of survival? That's a big question. One of the biggest problems or questions we have when we're working with, whether it's witnesses who are picking up something or mediums who are doing a reading for somebody. This is different than if a medium or psychic went into a place where the witnesses have been having seeming contact or encounters with a conscious entity. There's always a question of number one, if you're doing a reading, if a medium's doing a reading, is that reading pulling from the person themselves? Are the specifics and the information coming from the individual sitting in front of you? First thing to remember is that all mediums are psychics. Mediumship is a psychic ability. That is certainly possible, that some of the information is coming through from the person who's sitting there. But some of the information that comes through for some mediumship sittings is stuff that the people then have to confirm because they weren't aware or didn't know about it themselves. There's also if you had a psychic do a reading of a person and then a medium do a reading of a person, there's a difference if you're observing this even, as well as being the person having the reading. There's a subjective experience of that reading that's different between a psychic reading or even a fake reading and a mediumistic reading, somebody who's a medium who's communicating with somebody you knew or a family member or something like that. There's a more of an emotional context. There's a sense that they're actually having a conversation with someone, which you don't get with psychics. And there are mediums who have subjected themselves um, to brain scans and to actually doing their readings with EEG caps on and other forms of brain sensing technology. Some mediums can actually do readings of living people, and that to them is a different experience than having contact or having a conversation with somebody on the other side. And the activity in their brains indicates that these are truly different experiences for them. In other words, there's different brain states that are happening. And a good researcher would ask them to have a conversation or pretend to have a conversation with a ghost, and that's still different. So when the pseudo skeptics, the people who disbelieve in this stuff, say that mediums are faking it, fraudulent, which, that's a true negative. And they're doing it, and often it's calling them, just that taking advantage of people is what they usually say. And yet, when these mediums and psychics are doing things, when doing these, there's something going on in their brain. So at the very least, they're not consciously faking it, at least not in most contexts. Sometimes they might. Um, at the very least, that is happening for good mediums, good psychics. There's something going on in the brain that's different. There's a sincere belief, and there's different brain activity. And that in itself supports some of what we get. Then the other part of it is how much information evidentially comes through the medium as well. So it is a form of clairvoyance, you might say, or telepathy. I mean, mediums communicate with spirits via telepathy, mind to mind. That's all there is. They can't hear them out of their ears. Let's see here. Living agent size, Paul puts it. Yeah, so basically the question often is, when a medium is communicating, is it wholly them, which would be living agent psi, in other words, living agent ESP, or is it a combination of living person ESP or psi and dead person spirits psi? Because there's a two-way communication. So it's survival psi and living agent psi. If somebody in a house sees an apparition, a conscious entity who is reacting to them and trying to interact, that witness is experiencing living agent psi. They're using their ESP to connect with that ghost. The ghost is using their ESP to connect with you, the witness. So it comes from both sides. If it's a haunting, a residual haunting, the witness is using their ESP, whether they know it or not, to pick up the information. So we all have a little bit of ESP, and some of us more than others, and some of us for certain types of conditions for that. Let's see here. Incarnate Paranormal, last time you used a spirit box was 1,000 feet underground in a mine. No chance for radio signal. Stopped using it after that. Yeah, I had a case years ago where the house was under high tension wires, power lines. And so any EMF meter was useless. And another case, which was an old hotel, which unfortunately, for various reasons, the guy had to let go, was definitely had activity. I mean, really good witnesses to to activity in this hotel in a couple of rooms. And when I went in there the first time, as it happens, I'm sitting in, this was the Mansions Hotel in San Francisco, which was converted into private homes years ago, and there's no reports anymore once it was converted. But the Mansions Hotel, which was a huge mansion and had a lot of rooms, uh, when I was sitting there in the lobby, the small lobby, the hotel was across the street from the University of Pacific Medical School, and so lecturers from out of town, visiting doctors and surgeons would often stay at the Mansions and a couple of other hotels right there. And I'm sitting there, and a nurse comes in to make a reservation for a visiting lecturer, a surgeon, I believe. And as she's talking to the clerk, she says, "Oh, and he doesn't want to stay in Rose room because the last time he was here, the ghost woke him up in the middle of the night." I talked to her, and apparently this was not an uncommon thing to know about. But turning on the EMF meter topped out because, as it turns out, this is one of the reasons why the guy lost the hotel, one of many. The wiring was very old and unshielded, putting out a lot of EMF. So, we talk about tech, any tech, you always have to look for normal explanations first, even in the most haunted places. Even if the place is legitimately haunted, that reading you get may have nothing to do with the activity at all. Because again, none of this stuff can be designed to detect the paranormal for that matter. All right, let's see here. The TV shows Hurt the Field, brings so many people to locations. As you said a couple of shows ago, the more people go to locations, the more energy is left behind. Yeah. So what I was talking about there, for those of you who don't remember this or weren't present, we talk about residual hauntings as activity that's imprinted in the environment. And the activity was originally recorded or put in the environment unintentionally by living people. Dead people have nothing to do with the information, the imprint, at least when it's made. Down the road, they may be dead, but as it's made, as it's created, because of human activity and emotion, the information leaves in the environment. And with some of these locations, especially with excitable ghost hunters, and continual, sometimes changes in the story that are being discussed while they're there, they may be changing the imprint so that down the road, some group comes in there and they start experiencing stuff, not of the original haunting, but they start experiencing stuff of ghost hunters who are visiting the location, which changes. I mean, think about this. This changes the imprints, records over it in some respect, and recording over or having new activity on top of older activity is one way to get rid of older activity, which may be less desirable for that. So it is important to keep that in mind when you're going in there. Let's see here. Even batteries, cheaper ones, aren't shielded. They will set off any meters. That is absolutely true. Exhausting how much this happens can also create its own life and mythos. That's right. So, unfortunately, there are things like K2 meter, which is really common, but that responds not only to cell phones and texts. Somebody gets a text that could respond. They're sensitive enough that if there's something going on in the next room, it'll pick that up as a reading. It can respond to naturally occurring EMF in the environment as well, not just from technology. So there are significant issues there with that one. There are others that can be easily spoofed with walkie-talkies and other radio signals, like a REM pod. REM pod being a theremin, a cheap theremin kit. Theremin is a musical instrument that responds to our electromagnetic field when you play it. And the theremin, it's a good idea, but it can respond to other things as well. The same with a number of other things, spirit boxes as well, depending on the way it's designed. So there are many, many issues with the technology that's out there. And the thing you've got to do is, if you're using any of this stuff, number one, you need to connect it to a psychic or paranormal experience. I mean, you can get all the EVP you want in a place. And of course, a lot of it's not going to really be true EVP from a spirit. In fact, maybe none of it is, because there have been studies that show that human beings who are alive can affect devices unconsciously, especially when we're stressed or kind of putting out expectation. And I don't know if there's any greater expectation than a ghost hunter who really, 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 really wants a spirit voice on their recorder. And they may be affecting that to some extent. So you need somebody else there to tell you that there is a ghost present, because you can't make that assumption anywhere. I talked to one guy who said he can get EVP in his house. He must have ghosts following him around. It's like, no, he's probably doing it himself, because it turned out there were other electrical devices, electronic devices that were reacting in different ways when he was around as well. All right, so I see a question is there any truth in astrology? It depends on who you talk to. Not in the traditional view of astrology, for sure. The idea that stars exert an influence on us at birth and thereafter, what kind of influence are you talking about? I mean, here's the thing. One of my professors, the head of the astronomy department at Northwestern when I was down there, would often say that there's more of a local gravitational pull, like everything around you, on your as you're being born, on you, than there is from most of the planets. Now, the sun has and moon have tidal forces. There can be some different gravitational forces because of the structure of the solar system, but the positions of the stars don't mean anything that way. But there are other forms of astrology that people can use for prediction. And the most important thing I should say here is that an astrologer, a tarot card reader, a palmist, somebody who does any form of divination may be psychic, and simply using, without realizing it or not, using whatever they're doing, whether it's astrological charts, whether it's tarot cards, whether it's rune stones, throwing the bones. There's hundreds of variations of divination around the world, something I talk about in the parapsychology and anthropology course. They may be predicting or coming up with information psychically, but they're using those devices, those things, as the trigger for them. It's part of their process to trigger their psychic ability. Again, if they realize it or not. It also gives them a way to blame any bad stuff on the cards, on the stars. It says it right here in the runestones. Here's what's going to happen. I'm sorry if it's bad news. It's not me. It's that. That's what came out. So it is a way of kind of divorcing yourself from any sort of responsibility as well for that. Let's see here. Sorry for thank you, Graveyard Grog. Yeah, talking about the buffering issues as well. But thanks everybody for sticking with us with the buffering that we have going on here and there. Okay. That kind of brought us to kind of not a stopping point. I'm just trying to look through this article from if there's anything else I can talk about here directly on the technology. So one of the other things that I think everybody should realize, of course, is when you see there's so much on YouTube right now, and it's been that way for quite a while, and I see the Coast to Coast newsletter occasionally and the website talks about this great video of a ghost or some creature or something else. Let's remember there are so many ways to influence a video these days that have nothing to do with anything unexplained, paranormal, even more so now because of artificial intelligence. I've seen some great videos lately of, there's actually a couple of YouTube channels where it's Bigfoot holding a phone and narrating something in the woods and talking about, there was a clip I saw of Bigfoot actually talking into the camera, and in the background there's an alien spacecraft and he's approaching, and one where there's a Bigfoot meeting a Yeti and kind of sitting around. Sometimes Bigfoot sitting around a campfire and cooking food, and It looks absolutely real. That's all AI, and it's only going to get better. They're interesting, they're fun, but can't take pretty much anything at face value. Especially a lot of the videos that we see that look like they were done on security cameras of a gremlin or some critter showing up on camera in the middle of the night someplace. Um, you need absolutely need backup for that some kind. So it's really important that you always look through a critical lens at these things and find out what else was going on. When we try to analyze, people do send videos and pictures, and please don't. I'll tell you that right now. I've had people send me things and say, "Can you tell me what this is?" It's like, answer is, I cannot. I can probably tell you what it isn't if you give me more information, but I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you it's a ghost. Did you see the ghost? Did somebody experience the ghost when you took the picture? We just had a question for my students in a couple of classes. What makes good evidence? How is a video or photograph good evidence? And the answer is, first statement is, and there's two parts of this, eliminating as many possible normal explanations as you can, even if they're unusual. And the second part, which is really important to make it good evidence, is there has to be other evidence of something paranormal happening, meaning a human experience, or at the very least, devices you have, many different kinds of devices, all registering something unusual in the environment, which still doesn't mean it's a ghost, but at least indicates that something is affecting everything. And if a human says, I'm seeing the ghost now or experiencing something, that gives it context and meaning. All right. So, speaking of trigger objects, how do you feel about using them on investigations like whiskey or cigars, anything related to events in the location? I think that it's okay to bring things in that might be once you identify the characteristics of essentially not of the haunting, the residual haunting, but if you have an apparition that's been reported and interactive with people, then finding out who they are or getting some concept and bringing in something. It could actually doesn't even have to be a physical object. It could be music, for that matter. We sometimes use music like 40s music at the USS Hornet. Not that it really generated any additional activity, because we had a medium there who was a psychic medium who was actually communicating with them, but they liked it. So that's a good thing. But the idea of bringing in a trigger object that it's unrelated to who the apparition might be makes very little sense if you're trying to interact with the apparition. You're better off being friendly and putting the word out, talking about it and thinking about the apparition and saying, I want to communicate and that kind of thing, than sticking a trigger object and hoping that that's going to trigger them to interact. Some of those trigger objects have a theremin in them, like kind of the REM pod thing. They have an EMF sensor in them. They have something else, and they do make noise and so on. But there are so many other things that can trigger those things that have nothing to do with the paranormal that you can't assume it's the paranormal. And as my colleague Steve Parsons showed he did a webinar a few years ago. He's one of the folks involved with the Society for Psychical Research, the SPR over in the UK. He is, to me, the guy to go to for equipment issues and questions in our field. He's written a book called Ghostology that I highly recommend. In fact, that's the required text for my tech class. He's also co-written a book called Paracoustics for those of you who are interested in EVP. He wrote that with Cal Cooper, who's another parapsychologist. And Steve starts talking about trigger objects and said he just got one, and the ad said a realistic looking cat, which had EMF sensors in it and stuff. Realistic, highlighting realistic, and that was the ad. It was a cartoon cat. I mean, it was a stuffed animal, did not look like a real cat. I don't know what world it looked like a real cat, except maybe in cartoon world. So there's often, when you see advertisements for stuff, don't assume it can do, number one, what they say it can do from any of this ghost hunting equipment. And don't assume that you're not being taken for money. The REM pod, the guts of the REM pod, the theremin, you can buy a kit and build your own. One of the folks I work with did that when we were going down to the Whaley House Museum, and we sat in my hotel room and put it together before we went to the Whaley House. I think it was like $40. There are cheaper ones out there, and there's a really decent theremin that's $99 if you want to spend money. And then it's a box with an antenna on it, and you can learn to play it as a musical instrument. So why not get something that is useful or has fun things to do with it besides taking it ghost hunting? These other devices really don't have a lot of other uses other than what they're designed for. EMF readers are often designed for electromagnetic pollution, which can be not so good for your health. So get those other things, get the things. The EMF meter that I have, there is nothing in any of the literature about it is designed for industry. It was a little over $100. It was cheaper than any of the devices that even are promoting that even though they were not designed for ghost hunting or promoting ghost hunting. Um, the REM pod, if you have a $40 theremin inside with some lights on it, I'm guessing that the housing of it costs more money than the actual guts at that point. And they cost quite a bit of money. And then there was the guy who was selling cat toys, little balls, motion sensors that lit up when you moved them, had repackaged them and was selling them at a huge markup when you just needed to buy the cat toy. So there's a lot of stuff out there that people are making a good living at that for that. All right, let's see. Set your camera to burst mode. One photo gets tossed, a few on each side helps. And one of the other things I'll say about taking pictures is if you take a picture and there's something anomalous in it, make sure you take pictures above, below, side to side. In other words, that framed picture is not enough to determine if there's a normal explanation when the flash hits something. You need the full scope. And that's one of the most important things for anyone doing an analysis to even figure out what might have caused that anomaly in the picture. That's really important. I've had pictures people send me that they took outside where there's this misty stuff, which they claim is ectoplasm. And yes, it was a haunted place. But when I ask the question, usually one of two things happens. Two questions. Number one, were you smoking at the time? And number two, was it cold outside? Was it below a certain temperature? And sometimes I actually got a yes on both. So what they were seeing was the flash reflecting off their breath and the smoke that they were putting out from smoking. You need more information for those things. But a burst of pictures is really useful because the anomaly will typically only show up on one, unless it's physical. All right. Plenty of AI videos of huskies and other dogs doing something cute. Also animals jumping on trampolines in the backyard at night via a black and white trail cam. There's so many AI pictures out there. It's really getting harder, even with living people. I just watched a video that was really kind of cool. It's the origin of the Super Friends, the cartoons, but it's real people. And for the most part, first it starts out with Walter Cronkite talking about an invasion of lizard people, lizard men on Earth. And then it cuts to, at one point, Christopher Reeve as Superman. And it sounds like him, and it looked, except in certain angles, doesn't look like him. Linda Carter as Wonder Woman, Adam West as Batman, all of that. So it's getting better and better. And I'm sure it's going to be better in a year or less at this point. So it's becoming very hard to detect AI in writing as well. I know that there was a writer just recently, I was reading yesterday, in fact, a publisher has pulled the book because they've determined that the author wrote most of it using AI. And any publisher, and even Amazon, if you write a book and self-publish, Amazon asks you the question is, did you use AI? And generally AI is it's fine for covers. But if you use AI to write the interior of the book, you must disclose that. And there are detection programs that will detect AI-like patterns. You can kind of tell. On the other hand, there are people who actually use AI for editing. I got a colleague who has dyslexia, and he's used AI to help him write the book. And he just fully disclosed that and talked about that up front. So fine, that's honest, and so on. You think the dog in the new Superman movie is AI? You are correct. Crypto is AI, although Crypto is totally based on James Gunn's actual dog, who is not white, but looks a lot like that and behaves a lot like Crypto in the movie. So there may have been a little bit of video of his dog that was informing the AI artists, the CGI artists for that. Um, the Whaley House. So, okay, the Whaley House has some really good witnesses over the years. There was a curator who was a skeptic when she came in, I think in the late 70s. She's no longer with us in the physical world. But somebody, a friend of mine, from my friend who actually, Tom, who brought us down to the Whaley House in December of 2024, got to know her and even had his own experience. And so there seemed to be some real activity. The Whaley House had been investigated for decades. I knew an investigator named John Lamb who had done some work there. There's definitely activity there. Hard to know how much is residual and how much is actually apparitional. And they were pretty quiet. Mariah, the medium I work with us, and she picked up on them here and there, but she felt like they were standing back and watching what we were doing. Um, it was a little unusual for the Whaley House. Tom had to rent the place out after hours, and they were the folks running the place were kind of shocked that we wanted to leave the lights on. And apparently so were some of the ghosts, because ghost hunters come in and they want the lights off. But there's no need to do that. But we did have a couple of minor things going on, including interaction with a static electricity detector, and separately, several feet away, kind of in tandem, also the theremin that we actually had that we built. So there's some really interesting stuff going on. A couple other minor things that happen for that. Yeah, Graveyard Ground. I want to buy a theremin too. At some point, I'll pick one up here. Have you seen the claims from Chris Bledsoe? So remind me, is Chris Bledsoe the one connected to the Lutz family, the Amityville case? I'm trying to remember who that is. I don't always follow these things. So if Earth to Nick, if you want to just give me a little bit of hint, is remind me who Chris Bledsoe is. Somebody not in our field, so not directly in parapsychology. All right. Okay. I just Let's see here. I just did a couple of new podcasts, one of which was a show called Midnight Frequencies on Night Watch Radio, which should be up on Spotify, I think, in the next couple of days. I did that last night. And I did a show, which I'll be putting on I don't have a link yet for either one of these, but my website, lloydauerbach.com, has a media page. And on the media page, as I get new podcasts that I've been interviewed for, I'm putting links directly in there. So there's a huge list of stuff I've done over the years, and I haven't even gone through and added all the old ones that are still out there um, on YouTube. You can find and on Google that you can find. Okay, UFO of God, orbs, and apparitions. No, I actually I knew the name Chris Bledsoe, but I have no idea what that is. UFO of God, orbs, and apparition. I mean, any orb photos that people see. We don't count those as evidence for anything. And then there's the other issue is that sometimes people do actually see with their eyes, not just with a flash camera, balls of light moving erratically and otherwise. And that's what are called earth lights. They are plasma effects. They are ball lightning similar to that. People have caught ball lightning on camera, and there have been some videos, including one I saw taken near Gettysburg, that was witnessed visually by the people who took it, but also they were two balls of light moving through the forest. And I knew from other people who'd been to that area that there had been earth lights because of minerals in the soil. We have a place around here in the Bay Area, in the East Bay, that had earth lights reported a number of times for years until some construction and other stuff happened there. And from what research that I've done, and also what my late colleague Martin Caden did, plasma effects of that type can not just be ball shaped, but can be flat, kind of ovoid, almost saucer shaped, and can be sometimes a little bit larger. And they sometimes do follow power lines, and they sometimes do hit a car and cause like a temporary outage of the car, things like that. So yeah, I can't really comment on this stuff. I'll have to ask John Kruth about that. So I'll see him tomorrow night. Paul, you enjoy going on my website media page. I mean, honestly, there's so many old videos and old podcasts and radio shows, and I haven't even finished putting some of them up that are there. And there are a lot of old TV shows that I have. I have a YouTube page, which is just YouTube/Lloyd Auerbach. So if you just put my name in there, you can get to that page. There's a lot of like episodes from Sightings or segments from Sightings, some other shows that are there as well. There's been an uptick in these. Yes, check that out. Okay, yeah, it's the general mineral structure of the soil and the ground. Quartz crystals called piezoelectric crystals will often generate those because of static electricity, but there are also weather conditions that can generate a kind of ball lightning. And it's not lightning the way we think of it. So if someone were to get hit by ball lightning, it's a static field. It's not the kind of lightning that would potentially cause death or serious injury. But you can still have an experience, a shocking experience for that as well. And there are some good books. Paul Devereaux has written on earthlights. He also wrote about sacred locations, what are called sacred spots that various cultures have identified as sacred that seem to have different earth energy, you might say. And interestingly enough, a lot of churches in Europe were built on pagan sites that were considered sacred sites. And then many of you may have heard of ley lines, which is kind of an ancient system of the energy of the earth. In China, those are called the dragon lines of force. And there's some connection to actual measurable geomagnetic fields. So as if the ancients could feel the Earth's energy being different in these spots than it was in other spots. So there is a little bit of something to say that there may be something mystical, or at least the way we perceive that, way we pick up this energy in some respects. And it's something that we have to look at in our field as well, in parapsychology as well. Next time, just to let you all know, so I know we have like about 8 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes left, but I will be talking next time, which will be April 5th, about the other courses coming up for the Rhine Center. And if any of you have not heard about them or looked into them, they are both synchronous and asynchronous. In other words, there's a weekly lecture that we do live, instructors do live. Not all my students, not all of our students at all, attend them live. They are typically up, the recording is up the next day. People watch the recordings. The only thing you miss out on when they're live is if you wanted to ask a question live. You could always join me again for Ask Professor Paranormal and ask me the questions you couldn't ask live there. And there are ways to ask questions of the instructors on the forums. We have discussion forums, and people take the classes for fun. Some of our classes are not even meant to be part of our certificate programs. We have certificate programs at the Rhine, and including a couple of field investigation ones. We have some more research-oriented, some kind of liberal arts certificates as well. So you can take them for a grade towards one of the certificates. You can just take them for fun and participate as much or a little as you really want. And they're very reasonably priced compared to other courses you can take of other types. So, and I'll tell you very honestly, one of the points of feedback I get from my students always is, you give us a lot of information, and that is true. We have a lot of stuff for you in the courses. So you're going to get your money's worth. Let's put it that way. Okay. And you're enjoying them. Okay. Great to hear that. That's always good to hear. So if you don't know about the Rhine Research Center, it is the nation's oldest continuous laboratory. Started at Duke University in 1935. In 1965, when J.B. Rhine and Louisa Rhine retired from Duke University, it was moved off campus and eventually renamed the Rhine Research Center. At the moment, there's no research going on there because we're looking to buy a building, and we're out of our older space because the owners sold the building out from under us. We were leasing. So we are actually in a good financial state, and we'll be leasing, or excuse me, buying something new once we find something in Durham, North Carolina. The other thing I should mention too is that, and you might put this on your calendars for anybody who's on the West Coast, especially where you feel like traveling, October 23rd through 25th, there will be a big event at the Hotel Burbank in beautiful downtown Burbank, California, that is going to be put on by the Forever Family Foundation, of which I am president. There will be a focus on evidence for the afterlife, mediumship, even mediumship development. We're going to have some stuff with that as well. So we're going to take it from the science and from the practical perspective, the mediumship perspective as well. We used to run afterlife conferences previously. It's been a while since we've done one, and we're doing it in LA at this point. And we'll have a couple of bigger, large group readings, gallery readings with some well-known mediums, a couple of whom are very, very, very well-known, who are part of our certified mediums roster, people who have gone through testing. And there'll be a couple other kind of different tracks for people to go on so they don't have to, if they're less interested in mediumship and more interested in ghost hunting, for example, we're going to have something for that. We'll also maybe doing a spoon bending party too. So there'll be more information I'll have as soon as we have the page up. We're waiting to confirm our speakers and other people before we put this up on the website, the foreverfamilyfoundation.org website. But I'll definitely be talking more about that on April 5th because we'll have some idea of who's going to be there, who's tentatively going to be there. Certainly I'll be there. And we already know a couple of the mediums who'll be there. So that's October 23rd. That'll be a Friday night special event. And then the actual convention will be on the 24th and 25th. That's a Saturday, Sunday. Again, at the Hotel Burbank, which is only a couple miles from the Burbank Airport, a little further from LAX. But any of you who happen to be in Southern California or even Northern California, I'm driving down. So I saw somebody from San Francisco. You might consider coming and joining us there. It'll be good. Yes, the Forever Family Foundation is the place that does test mediums. We have a testing protocol, and it's based on controlled experimentation from years ago. I'll tell you honestly that only about 10% of the people who try it pass. Some people have to take it more than once, and we allow that. So we're really careful about the cold reading thing and all this stuff. And there's some ethical issues we have to go into in discussion with them as well. But yes, if you go to foreverfamilyfoundation.org, you will see, go to mediums, and you'll see the list of certified mediums if you're ever looking for somebody good, who's got a good ethics. All right, so we're down to the wire now. Is a foundation, let's say it. So the foundation tests people virtually these days. It was in New York, it was on Long Island, but we started doing the testing virtually a couple of years ago because we could not possibly test people as often as people were asking or applying to be tested. And some of the folks just couldn't make it across country. So we've worked out a slightly different testing protocol for that. All right, so we are at just about at 6:30 Pacific time, 9:30 Eastern time. Out of time here. I want to thank you all for hanging in tonight. Over the next couple of weeks, jot down your questions so you can remember to ask me next time. You can also email me at askprof, paranormal@gmail.com if you got something. And we'll see you next time. Have a great couple of weeks, and happy April Fool's Day. Good night.